before goalie masks were standard, before player safety was even a conversation. One quiet asthmatic kid from rural Quebec shattered hockey's toughest traditions with nothing but a homemade fiberglass mask and the sheer courage to say, no more. Jacques Plante didn't just revolutionize goaltending. He rewrote the rulebook, from backstopping the Montreal Canadiens to 5 consecutive Stanley Cups, to defying the NHL's norms by wearing the first ever goalie mask in a live game. Plante's story is one of relentless innovation, resilience, and genius. He turned asthma, pain, and isolation into tools of transformation. He wasn't loud, but he was fearless. He didn't fit the mold, so he broke it. This is more than just a sports story. It's the legacy of a man who changed the way hockey is played, lived, and remembered. Whether you're a lifelong fan or new to the game, get ready to discover the masked legend whose quiet bravery left a permanent mark on the ice. Jacques Plante was born on January 17, 1929, in Notre-Dame-de-Mont-Carmel, a small rural town in Quebec. He was the eldest of 11 children. The Great Depression cast a long shadow over his childhood, and winters in Quebec were as unforgiving as the economic hardship. Opportunities were scarce, and privilege was a distant dream. Yet, in this austere setting, a fire burned in young Jacques' calm brown eyes. Despite chronic asthma that made breathing a struggle, he found solace and purpose on the ice. From the age of 3, Jacques gripped his first hockey stick, a gift that ignited a lifelong passion. His father, Xavier, built a backyard rink with pride and perseverance, using little more than determination and the frozen Quebec winter. With a hand-me-down stick and a potato sack for a goal, Jacques carved his dreams into that makeshift ice. By 12, his asthma was so severe it could have ended his aspirations. Most boys would have retreated, but Jacques adapted. He didn't complain, he studied. He learned to read the game, to anticipate plays before they unfolded. This quiet superpower, his uncanny sense of timing, would become the cornerstone of his legacy. Jacques Plante wasn't flashy, but there was a quiet brilliance in his movement, while other goaltenders of his era stood rigid, like statues guarding the crease. Jacques roamed. He drifted outside the net, reading passes and intercepting plays like a chess master, plotting 3 moves ahead. He handled the puck with a confidence that was unheard of for goalies at the time, treating it as an extension of himself. To watch him was to glimpse the future of goaltending. His professional career began in the early 1950s with the Montreal Canadiens, where he quickly established himself as a cornerstone of the team. Plante wasn't just a goalie, he was a strategist. His ability to anticipate shots and control the puck reshaped how the position was played. By the mid-1950s, he was the backbone of a Canadiens dynasty, backstopping them to 5 consecutive Stanley Cups from 1956 to 1960. His statistics were staggering. Goals against averages around 2.00, a pile of shutouts, and 7 Vezina trophies as the league's top goaltender. Only Dominik Hasek would later surpass that Vezina record. Hockey in the 1950s was a brutal sport. Goalies were expected to endure pain without complaint, taking pucks to the face and stitching up wounds before returning to the ice. It was a code of toughness that left little room for self-preservation. But on November 1st, 1959, Jacques Plante rewrote that code. During a game against the New York Rangers, a shot from Andy Bathgate's stick smashed into Plante's face, shattering his nose and opening a gash that required 21 stitches. Blood streamed down as he was helped to the dressing room. Most assumed his night was done, but Jacques had other plans. He returned to the bench wearing a fiberglass mask, a homemade creation he'd been experimenting with in practice. His coach, Toe Blake, was livid. "You can't wear that," he snapped. Plante's response was calm but firm. No mask, no play. With that, he stepped back onto the ice, defying convention and igniting a revolution. The Canadiens went on a 10-game win streak with Plante in the mask, silencing critics who called him a coward. By the early 1960s, goalies across the NHL began adopting masks, and Plante's innovation became the standard. He hadn't just protected his face, he'd saved a generation of goaltenders from unnecessary harm. During the late 1950s, Jacques Plante was the linchpin of the Montreal Canadiens' unprecedented dominance, a golden era that saw the team capture 5 consecutive Stanley Cups from 1956 to 1960. As the backbone of this dynasty, Plante's performance was nothing short of extraordinary. His goals against average rarely climbed above 2.00, a testament to his precision and foresight in the net. Shutouts stacked up, and his 7 Vezina trophies, awarded to the NHL's top goaltender, came with a regularity that stunned the hockey world. These accolades, earned between 1956 and 1962, underscored his consistency and dominance, a record only surpassed decades later by Dominik Hasek. Plante's clutch performances in high-stakes playoff games cemented his status as a legend. Whether it was a sprawling save in double overtime or a calm interception of a breakaway, he had an almost supernatural ability to read the game. His teammates, including legends like Maurice Rocket, Richard, and Jean Béliveau, relied on his steady presence to anchor their high-octane offense. Plante wasn't just part of the dynasty. He defined it, proving that a goaltender could be the heart of a championship team. Yet, for all his brilliance, Plante was never content to conform to the expectations of a quiet, subservient athlete. In an era when players were expected to endure hardship without complaint, Plante was a vocal advocate for change. He analyzed the game with a scholar's precision, often breaking down plays and strategies in ways that challenged conventional wisdom. His willingness to question coaches, including the formidable Toe Blake, set him apart. Plante didn't just play the game, he studied it, dissecting angles, puck trajectories, and opponent tendencies with a level of detail that was decades ahead of its time. His advocacy extended beyond the ice. Plante openly discussed his chronic asthma, a condition that could have derailed his career. He pushed for better medical treatments, urging team doctors to prioritize player health over outdated notions of toughness. He also called for safer travel conditions, criticizing the grueling schedules and cramped bus rides that left players exhausted. Most notably, he championed player safety, arguing that the NHL needed to protect its athletes from the sport's inherent dangers. These ideas, radical for the 1950s and early 1960s, foreshadowed modern player welfare initiatives, but often put Plante at odds with the hockey establishment. Plante's independence and outspokenness came at a steep cost. In 1963, the Montreal Canadiens made a decision that sent shockwaves through the hockey world. They traded their masked marvel to the New York Rangers, a team mired in mediocrity and far from Stanley Cup contention. The move was staggering, akin to trading a franchise icon in his prime. Fans in Montreal were heartbroken, flooding radio shows and newspapers with outrage. For Plante, the trade was a bitter pill, a rejection by the organization he had helped elevate to greatness. The Rangers, struggling to rebuild after years of futility, offered little support for Plante's brilliance. The team's porous defense left him exposed, and New York's smoggy air exacerbated his asthma, making every game a physical battle. Despite these challenges, Plante showed flashes of his genius, making acrobatic saves and attempting to instill his puck-handling philosophy in a roster unaccustomed to such innovation. But the Rangers' lack of depth and cohesion proved insurmountable. After 2 grueling seasons, Plante retired in 1965 at the age of 36, seemingly closing the chapter on his NHL career. The hockey world assumed it had seen the last of Jake the Snake. Legends, however, don't fade so easily. In 1968, at the age of 39, Plante shocked the hockey world by signing with the expansion St. Louis Blues, a team in its infancy in the newly expanded NHL. This was no sentimental return. Plante was determined to dominate. Sharing goaltending duties with another Hall of Famer, Glenn Hall, he brought stability and leadership to a young franchise. His impact was immediate and profound. In 1969 and 1970, Plante led the Blues to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, a remarkable feat for an expansion team. His performance was a masterclass in goaltending, blending his trademark anticipation with a veteran's poise. In the 1968-69 season, he posted a 1.96 goals against average and 5 shutouts, numbers that belied his age. The following year, he shared the Vezina Trophy with Hall, his 7th and final win of the award. At a time when most players were long retired, Plante was rewriting the rules of what a goaltender could achieve, proving that age was no barrier to greatness. In 1970, at the age of 41, Jacques Plante joined the Toronto Maple Leafs, embarking on what would be the penultimate chapter of his NHL playing career. From 1970 to 1973, he transitioned from being the undisputed star goaltender to a veteran presence, sharing the crease with younger netminders. These years were quieter in terms of personal accolades, but no less significant. Plante embraced his role as a mentor, leveraging his decades of experience to guide the next generation of goaltenders. In Toronto, Plante worked closely with Bernie Parent, a promising but raw goaltender who would later become a Hall of Famer. Parent openly credited Plante's mentorship as pivotal to his success, particularly his 2 Stanley Cup wins with the Philadelphia Flyers in 1974 and 1975. Plante shared intricate details of his craft, the art of positioning to cut down angles, the confidence to handle the puck like a defenseman, and the mental fortitude required to withstand the relentless pressure of goaltending. He taught Parent to anticipate plays, to see the game before it happens, a philosophy that became a hallmark of Parent's own career. Plante's ability to articulate these nuances transformed him into a teacher on the ice, his crease becoming a classroom for aspiring netminders. Plante's final NHL stint came in the 1972 to 1973 season with the Boston Bruins, where he played just 8 games. Though brief, his time in Boston left a lasting impression. Teammates, including stars like Bobby Orr, marveled at his work ethic and analytical mind. At 44, Plante was still diving for pucks in practice, studying game footage and breaking down opponent tendencies with a precision that belied his age. His dedication inspired younger players, and his presence in the locker room brought a sense of gravitas to a Bruins team chasing another Stanley Cup. By the time he retired for good in 1973, Plante had solidified his reputation not just as a player, but as a living encyclopedia of goaltending wisdom, whose influence extended far beyond his own saves. Retirement in 1973 did not mark the end of Jacques Plante's contributions to hockey. Instead, it opened a new chapter where he channeled his passion into coaching, writing, and advocacy. Plante remained deeply connected to the sport, determined to share his knowledge and push for progress in a game he had already revolutionized. In 1978, Plante published On Goaltending, a groundbreaking technical manual that remains a foundational text for the position. The book was a masterwork of analysis, filled with meticulously drawn diagrams illustrating puck trajectories, crease positioning, and save techniques. Plante broke down complex concepts, such as how to read a shooter's body language or how to use the stick to deflect shots, into actionable advice. Written in an era when goaltending was still largely taught through trial and error, the book was a revelation, offering a scientific approach to a role often shrouded in mystique. Aspiring goaltenders, from amateurs to professionals, pored over its pages, and its influence can still be felt in modern goaltending curricula. Plante also took his teachings directly to young players, running goaltending clinics in Switzerland and Quebec. These sessions were more than instructional, they were inspirational. With the same intensity he brought to NHL games, Plante coached kids on the finer points of the position, from glove saves to mental preparation. He emphasized discipline and creativity, encouraging students to develop their own style while mastering the fundamentals he had pioneered. Parents and players alike were struck by his patience and passion, qualities that made him as effective a teacher as he had been a player. Off the ice, Plante continued to advocate for player safety and health, issues he had championed throughout his career. He spoke candidly about the physical toll of goaltending, particularly the strain of playing through injuries, and the grueling travel schedules of the era. His most personal cause was asthma management, a condition he had battled since childhood. Plante shared his experiences to destigmatize the illness, urging teams to provide better medical support for players with chronic conditions. He also addressed the psychological pressures of goaltending, the isolation, the scrutiny, the weight of every goal allowed. In an era when mental health was rarely discussed in sports, Plante's openness was revolutionary, laying the groundwork for modern conversations about athlete well-being. Behind Plante's composed exterior lay a man confronting significant personal challenges. His chronic asthma was a lifelong adversary, one he managed with extraordinary secrecy to protect his career. During games, he relied on oxygen tanks between periods to stabilize his breathing, a practice he concealed from coaches and teammates to avoid being benched or labeled as weak. This quiet resilience defined much of his life, as he refused to let his condition overshadow his achievements. Plante's ability to perform at an elite level while battling asthma was a testament to his determination, a private victory as impressive as any Stanley Cup. Plante also developed unique coping mechanisms for the mental demands of goaltending. On team buses, he knitted, a habit that raised eyebrows among teammates accustomed to more traditional displays of masculinity. For Plante, knitting was a calming ritual, a way to steady his nerves and focus his mind. Decades later, this practice would be recognized as a prescient approach to stress management, aligning with modern mindfulness techniques embraced by athletes. Plante's willingness to embrace such unconventional methods underscored his independence and self-awareness, qualities that set him apart in a conformist era. In the 1970s, Plante's second marriage to Jacqueline Gagne brought him to Switzerland, a move that offered both personal and health benefits. The clean alpine air provided relief for his asthma, allowing him to breathe more easily than he had in North American cities like New York or Toronto. Plante embraced life in Europe, settling in the town of Sierra and immersing himself in the local hockey community. He coached junior teams, ran clinics, and raised his family in a setting that felt like a sanctuary after years of battling his condition in smoggy arenas. Switzerland also allowed Plante to live more fully outside the spotlight. He enjoyed the quieter pace, spending time with his wife and stepchildren while continuing to contribute to hockey. His clinics in Switzerland attracted players from across Europe, and his reputation as a goaltending guru grew. For a time, it seemed Plante had found a perfect balance, a life where his health, family, and passion for hockey coexisted harmoniously. Tragedy, however, struck in 1985. Plante was diagnosed with stomach cancer, a devastating blow that came just as he was settling into his post-hockey life. True to his character, he faced the illness with the same quiet determination that had defined his career. He underwent treatment in Switzerland, supported by his family, but the cancer proved aggressive. On February 27, 1986, Jacques Plante passed away at the age of 57, leaving behind a grieving hockey world. Tributes poured in from Montreal to St. Louis, from players he had mentored to fans who had cheered his saves. The sport had lost not just a legend, but a visionary who had changed it forever. Jacques Plante's influence on hockey is profound and enduring. The fiberglass mask he introduced on November 1, 1959, became a universal standard, saving countless goaltenders from disfiguring injuries and fundamentally altering the sport's approach to safety. His innovative style, roaming the crease, handling the puck with confidence, and analyzing plays with surgical precision, redefined goaltending. Modern greats like Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur, and Carey Price owe a debt to Plante's pioneering techniques. Every time a goaltender ventures out to play the puck or calmly tracks a shot through a screen, Plante's ghost is in the crease. His contributions were celebrated with the highest honors. In 1978, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, a recognition of his transformative career. In 1995, the Montreal Canadiens retired his number 1, raising it to the rafters of the Bell Centre in a ceremony filled with emotion. Fans, many too young to have seen him play, cheered for the masked marvel who had defined their team's golden era. In 2017, the NHL named Plante one of its 100 greatest players, a fitting tribute to his enduring influence on the game's history. Jacques Plante's true legacy, however, lies beyond the trophies and banners. It resides in the courage of a soft-spoken kid from Notre-Dame-du-Mont-Carmel, Quebec, who dared to challenge the status quo. When he donned that mask in 1959, he said, "No more" to broken faces and reckless endangerment, forcing the NHL to prioritize player safety. When he spoke out about asthma, travel conditions, and mental health, he said, "No more" to silent suffering, advocating for a fairer, more humane game. When he returned to the NHL at 39 and dominated, he said, "No more" to the idea that age could extinguish a legend's fire. Plante turned fear into innovation, transforming the goaltender's mask from a symbol of cowardice into a badge of pragmatism. He turned vulnerability into strength, openly addressing his asthma and mental health in an era that demanded stoicism. And he turned silence into a revolution, using his voice to push for a safer, smarter, and more inclusive sport.